welcome back. I love this session because we cannot have a summit without looking at the environment that children play in. We listened to Rusty talk about the outdoor space. Now we're moving into the indoor space with Sandra Duncan and Kathryn Murray. And they're going to provide you a framework of looking at your environment, learning environment that's based on brain research. Oh my gosh, such a treat. So let me read a little bit about them. Dr. Kathryn Murray has over 37 years of formal experience in the education sector. Her unique blend of personal experience, research, expertise, and intuition guides her to share practical approaches to help parents and early childhood educators be the best they can so that every child has a solid start in life. Dr. Sandra Duncan is an international consultant, author of 6 books focused on the environment, design of early childhood classrooms, and designer of a preschool furniture collection called A Sense of Place Extraordinary. And I got to co-author a book with her, which was extraordinary. Sandra has transformed hundreds of ordinary early childhood environments into extraordinary, inspiring places for children to be and to become their very best. As always, you know, Sandra is going to inspire us, and Kathryn is extraordinary as well. Enjoy. Hey, welcome back. I'm so excited to have Sandra and Kathryn here. And before we get going, I just want to say that Sandra, you are such a hero to me. And, you know, I've had the delight and privilege of working with you on 2 books. And you are one of the most creative, deep thinkers I know. So Thank you. I just love all your work. And I know you spoke so highly of Kathryn, and I'm excited to see what you guys bring together. I would love to know what brought you together, and give me a little bit of that story.
I can start that, Kathryn. I was actually attending an online conference, and I listened to Kathryn's presentation, and it just flipped a light switch for me, and it resonated with me. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been working with environmental design for a number of years now, and I never ever thought about the idea that Kathryn presented in this presentation, and that is to align your classroom design with brain development. And so I just was in awe of her work, and I managed to get a hold of her, and I was so excited when I did. So yeah.
And so that's where this partnership began. Sandra contacted me, and we started talking about what she does with the built environments and her power of place and space. And I started thinking about this based on an article that we shared, and started thinking about the classroom design and the things that I had already been promoting around using brain science and brain development to help design the classroom. And I came up with this brain set notion. So this is an original concept that we're going to be presenting in our presentation at this conference. So we're very proud of this, and it's an original framework, and it really talks about the different areas of the brain: the survival part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, and the thinking part of the brain. And all of the different classroom components that we need to factor in to activate each one of those areas of the brain so that the classroom is engaging for the children. And it's also engaging for the teachers, because the children are learning, and they want to learn because they're in all these little lovely spaces that we're going to show you photos of in our presentation as well. So you get to have the theory, but you also get to have some images, and you get to have some information about space, place, built environments. So we've combined our ideas.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Well, let's go and hear your presentation.
Hello, and welcome to our presentation entitled Designing Brain-Based Learning Environments. We are delighted to be with you. The purpose of this workshop is to, number one, discuss the power of built environments and how they impact young children's lives. And number two, the connection between brain development and classroom design. And finally, introduce brain set framework for classroom design. In the past few years, I have been researching the importance of built environments, and I'm beginning to understand how these built environments have a powerful impact on everyday lives. Even though I've been instrumental in the designing and building of childcare centers throughout my career, until recently, I mainly focused on the four walls, the right square footage for the number of children, how many bathrooms, where they were located, egress and regress, and so on. Although focusing on these elements were important, I now realize there's much more to consider. Today's presentation is asking you to consider the intersection between the development of young children's brains and the way the classroom is designed. So, if you were like I was a few years ago, you may not know exactly what is a built environment. In their book, Spaces for Children, The Built Environment and Child Development, they define built environments like this. Built environments are man-made structures, features, and facilities viewed collectively as an environment in which people live, work, and play. Examples of built environment include houses, apartments, tents, office buildings, movie theaters, shopping malls, tree houses, igloos, restaurants, factories, and I think you get it. It also includes boats, trucks, airplanes, and cars, which is something I was very interested in learning. Once you really begin thinking about it, built environments are everywhere and they occupy a lot of our lives. In fact, in 2001, this was in 2001, think about what it would be like today with COVID. The National Human Activity Pattern Survey found that with indoor built environments, people spent as much as 86.9% of their time indoors, and 68.7% of people's time was spent in residences or homes. With COVID-19, think about the impact of it and how much time we must now spend in indoor built environments. A more recent study by Velux America, it's a window company, found that 1 in 4 Americans spend the entire day, without going outside. That means 25% of Americans spend entire days in built environments, never being in the great outdoors. Again, this number may be higher in today's world with COVID-19. Finally, in 2016, the National Council for Educational Statistics estimated that young children under the age of 5 spend an average of 30.6 hours a week in non-parental care, such as in the built environment of a childcare center. Knowing all this, it's easy to understand why designing childcare centers, and more specifically, early childhood classrooms, is more than those architectural blueprints as I thought those many years ago. It is indeed much, much more. This presentation is about acknowledging the importance of built environments for young children. It will focus on what we call brain set for classroom design. This presentation is about designing brain-based learning environments and the power of place. It's about your power of place, called your classroom. Place is powerful. When thinking about the power of place, I'm reminded of the day when I picked up my granddaughter from nature preschool. When my granddaughter Sierra was in preschool, I had the extreme good fortune to be asked to pick her up sometimes. Once buckled up in the car, our conversations would go much like this. Grandma, how was your day? Sierra, fine. Grandma, what did you do? Sierra, played. Grandma, who did you play with? Sierra, my friends. Grandma, what did you play? Sierra, nothing much. Grandma, what did you like best? Everything, Sierra said. Finally, completely out of patience with my barrage of questions, Sierra said with much indignation, Grandma, it was just an ordinary and regular day. Now, I know for a fact that her day was a far cry from being ordinary because I could see the mud on the bottom of her boots, the grass stains on her jeans, and a bag of autumn leaves and sticks out on the back seat of the car that she had gathered that day. To a child who attends a nature preschool and spends the majority of her time outside trampling and playing in the woods, I guess that particular day could seem pretty ordinary to her. Looking back, however, on the situation, I would wager a new guess about Sierra. The time Sierra spent exploring and playing in the woods are moments that have actually shaped and defined the borders of her childhood. What I, as a grandmother, needed to remember is this. Her regular and ordinary day at nature preschool was a succession of moments, and the beauty of her life and all of our lives is captured in these everyday moments. I know without a shadow of a doubt that many years from now, and maybe forever, she will remember her preschool nature place. As a child, this place has had a powerful impact on her. And as an adult, the power of the place will always be indelibly stamped in her memories. Space also has the ability to influence what we do, how we act, how we behave, and what we say. The classroom is a built environment and has the power to shape our lives as well as the lives of the children who abide in the space. Space has the power to influence and shape our lives. According to architect Goldenhagen, she says, for example, think about a football stadium and our associations and associated behaviors in that environment. At a football game, we act quite differently than we would act in a church or a synagogue. At a football game, it would be okay if we yelled, shouted, or even cursed at the referee. But in a synagogue, that behavior would be very unacceptable. The shape and the space of our environments shape our behavior. Space also has the ability to empower or not. It has the ability to enable or not. The way we set up our classrooms influences how children personally experience this space. Jim Greenman in Caring Spaces, Learning Places wrote that space speaks, and I quote, space speaks to each of us. Long corridors whisper, run to a child. Physical objects have emotional messages of warmth, pleasure, fear. Action messages of come close, touch me, or stay away. Identity messages of I'm strong or I'm fragile, unquote. That's from page 17 in Jim Greenman's book. Environments, no matter if they are built or not, affect us in powerful ways, emotionally, socially, physically, and cognitively. For example, Ernest Hemingway claimed that he needed water nearby as an inspiration to write the novel The Old Man and the Sea. Artists such as Monet needed lily pads. Architect Frank Lloyd Wright incorporated water into his famous waterfalls home. We all need the beauty. Both adults and children need it. It is a condition of living, according to Dr. Ruth Wilson. Think about it for a moment. What is the most beautiful space of your childhood memories? Close your eyes and just think about it. For Sierra, it might be that small creek that trickled through the preschool woods where she caught tadpoles and frogs. Or it might be Grandma and Pa's lake house where she caught her first fish. For me, it was playing with my baby doll under the card table that my mom had draped a sheet over. It was my special place. As you remember your childhood space, remember who you were with and where you were. Remember the smells, the sights, the textures. So think back to that place of beauty. Your memory was beautiful. Beauty is intertwined with emotions, according to Dr. Ruth Wilson. And interestingly enough, we have the research that says emotions are connected to cognition. Cognition is linked to memory. The research of Calkins and Bell in 2010 demonstrated the notion that the child development is indeed at the intersection of emotions and cognition. What does this all mean for early childhood professionals about how we design our environments? Remember when you reminisced just a few seconds ago about your childhood special place? It was a place of beauty, at least to you. You remembered this place because in some way you were linked to your emotions, and memory is linked to cognition. Because beauty, emotions, and cognition are interconnected, they are the foundation for learning. Therefore, beauty and emotions are the foundation for learning and also must be the cornerstone of design for early childhood environments. So you may be thinking, okay, I get it. I understand the connection between beauty, emotions, and classroom design. But what does this have to do with the brain? Well, let's find out.
Sandra has painted a lovely picture for us and helped us to imagine our special place and our special space. And I'm going to extend on that by talking about how we set up our classroom and how that's linked to a child's brain and also our own brain so that we can effectively teach and effective learning takes place as well. So designing and setting up the classrooms with emotion and cognition in mind can empower children to use spaces in ways that make memorable moments. For children, engaged learning can be all in a day's work. Children can achieve amazing things in their regular day, just as Sierra did in her nature kindergarten. Well-planned spaces offer opportunities for empowerment, influence our thoughts and our actions, and can shape the interactions we have with materials and the interactions between people. Think of a room in your house that you love. You love the way the light comes through the windows. You love the way the furniture is positioned, the way the room makes you feel, and the activities that you do in that room. Maybe even the accomplishments you achieve in that room. It's the same for children. Spending time linking how the brain feels to being productive is worth the effort. The brain is really made up of 3 levels. We start at the bottom, and in utero, the brain grows from the bottom up. So we start at the bottom with the reptilian brain, and that's the brain stem at the base of your skull. And it develops first for survival. It's those involuntary responses, and it's there to keep us safe and for us to survive. As we move up, we go to the mammalian brain, the limbic system. That's where the amygdala sits, and that's where the emotions are housed. So all of our emotions are driven from the amygdala that sits in the middle of the brain, and it's linked to that fight, flight, or freeze, which goes down to the survival brain, so that if we're feeling frightened, we know that we've got to move, and so we go down into our survival brain, and that's what makes us move. As we move up the brain, we go to the human brain then, and that's the neocortex. And that's for thinking, for memory, for problem solving, but it's linked to those 2 lower brains. Also, our gut or our intuition that connects the 3 areas of the brain links together so that we have those emotions, we have the feeling that a space or a place can evoke. So to connect children and to help them get into a state of learning, we must first make sure that they feel safe. Then we connect with the emotions so that they're happy or they love the space they're in, they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel valued, they feel worthy, or they feel really confident in the space. So then they can connect with the thinking part of the brain and make the memories, solve the problems, communicate, and much, much more. Classroom spaces that support brain development helps to engage children in their learning. Spaces done well makes for calmer rooms with less behaviour issues, greater oral language development, collaboration, cooperation, decision-making, and more, because children feel relaxed and they feel safe. My favourite saying is, a calm brain is a thinking brain. So it seems to make sense. It makes sense that if we can design and organise classrooms and outside environments that complements the holistic development, then we will have the wonderful privilege of supporting children's growth in brain development, as well as those normal domains that we always talk about, the physical, the social, emotional, cognitive, and language domains. And we do all of this while they have fun learning playfully, if we set up our classrooms in a way that is conducive to learning. That brings me to our framework called Brain Set. And we call it Brain Set because it's all about the brain, but we're talking about the survival part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, and the thinking part of the brain. So that's where the set comes through. And we've got different areas in these different aspects of the brain that we need to consider when we're setting up the classroom environment. The first one we're going to look at is survival. The brainstem is all about survival. So feeling safe has to be achieved before any thinking can occur. This can look like small defined spaces in the classroom so that children have somewhere to go where they don't feel threatened and they don't feel under pressure. We want the cortisol level in the brain to be low so engagement and learning can occur. This is particularly important for children who might have suffered trauma, either prolonged trauma or situational trauma. Currently, many children across the world have experienced primary or secondary trauma due to the pandemic. So helping them to feel safe and calm in your classroom activates the survival part of the brain, and that's super important right now. So what does this look like and what does it include? So the survival part includes having defined spaces in the classroom. It includes this thing called wayfinding. We talk about the roof lines of the classroom. We talk about the acoustics, how the sound bounces around. We talk about the type of lighting that might be in the room. And we talk about something called rounded corners. We've got some images to show you that explains this a little bit more. This is an outside space, It's a little space for two. So it's a defined space that makes children feel safe and secure. You see that we've got curtaining around this little space, and that helps for that psychological containment. Psychological containment is a real thing, and it just means children's minds feel safe because they feel as though they're in this protected little bubble almost. This is an outside space out in the playground area, but this could also be in an inside part of your classroom. You'll notice that there's plenty of detail too, attention to detail. This is another safe little space for children in the corner of the room. The use of the mirror and the open-ended materials suggests options for the child, using the natural colours and timber and, a nice environment allows them to look at themselves in the mirror. And we know that young children are egocentric. They love looking at themselves in the mirror. So including a mirror adds an extra dimension to it and adds depth to that whole space when a child is sitting on the seat. So that's a really special space just for one. And it's particularly important if you have children that need to have a break from the world, because when they're looking at the mirror, or when they're just working in a space for one like that, facing a wall or in a corner, as that one is, their back is to the world. So this is particularly good for children who may have special needs. Defined spaces with soft furnishings are really important too. The reading box that's so small there, it's really a cute little space to crawl into, adds to that psychological containment that I mentioned before and that feeling of being safe. So having that softness that children can snuggle into, so we're activating the senses there, and having a small defined space for that psychological containment is an important aspect of the survival part of the brain. Wayfinding is our next point. Wayfinding is really just showing children the direction to go. It's like having a little pathway through your classroom or through your outside space so that children know how to navigate the terrain pretty much. So in this instance, we've got two defined spaces. You'll notice that we haven't got any dividers between those spaces. They are defined by having the mats, and it's defined by having a table. So there's two smaller spaces there with a pathway on the left-hand side so that children can navigate their way from one to the next. And that's another part of survival, making it really clear for the child which way they're supposed to go. The other thing that's really important is to make it feel soft and secure in your classroom. So we have these small defined spaces, and we use lighting to give that warm, cozy feeling. We take we turn the overhead lights off. Most places have got fluorescent lights, those fluoro lights, which are bright white lights. And for those children who are super sensitive to sound, they can hear the little buzz that actually happens from those fluoro lights. And it sounds like a mosquito in your ear constantly. So if we can turn those overhead lights off and put lamps into our classrooms in a safe way, so cords are sort of hidden or up high, it makes the feeling for the children much softer, much safer, and much calmer for them. You'll notice that the ceiling is lowered as well using the curtaining. So we're using the lamps, we're using for the lighting, and we're lowering the ceiling to make that little defined space. And it's quite purposeful. You can see the types of opportunities for learning that are in that space. So to add to what we've been saying about the roof lines and the acoustics, we can do things like this and use the natural light. And you'll notice that in this instance, the furniture is pulled away from the walls, and it's the furniture that actually defines the space. The roof line's lowered. The fluorescent light is on in this image, but I don't think you really need that because there's the natural light that's coming in. So we could turn that off to soften the atmosphere and define this purposeful space. Again, softening our spaces, we can use curves. We can have some rounded corners so that the spaces are still defined, but it's not harsh square angles. It's nice and soft. So we're looking at making the children feel calm, secure, safe by having something like rounded corners in our room. And this is, remember, this is all part of the survival part of the brain that we're activating. Let's go to the second part now of our set framework, and that's all about emotions. And memories are fueled by emotions, as Sandra mentioned earlier, and how you feel in a situation or a place dictates how you're going to act. Think of the first day at a new job compared with going out for dinner with friends. Similar occasions, you're meeting people, but different feelings and different responses. It's the same for children. Learning positive interactions, being calm or anxious, all play a part in the learning. The limbic system is closely linked to the brainstem, and together these areas dictate the fight, flight, or freeze responses. Using the learning spaces to promote calm, safe, secure, and relaxed feelings open up the pathway to playful learning and joyful experiences. So when we're talking about the emotions, we're thinking about the feelings that we have for learning. And to build on those feelings, we make sure that we include things like soft furnishings. And we've already had a look at some of these, but I want to highlight them in this section around emotions. We talk about soft colours. We talk about the soft lighting, that notion of psychological containment, and that connection with nature. So in this one, you can see that this is a small defined space for a young child. And you can see that there's a soft, fluffy mat that she's sitting on there with the mirrors wrapped around as well. So the use of soft furnishings is important for that texture, that the sensory engagement, as Sandra mentioned earlier in this presentation. Now, there could also be some cushions there. There could be some, soft dolls put in there, or some fluffy toys that could be added to that experience as well for the child to extend those tactile experiences with the soft furnishings. But it doesn't stop there for the child. It can also be for you. So this is a classroom in China, and the children would often sit up on that couch with the teacher and have a story with her, like snuggle up and read a story together with 2 or 3 children. So that couch that she's reading the story from there was used for multiple purposes. And you'll notice the fluffy toys that she has there as well. So the children would sometimes sit with her, cuddle a fluffy toy and listen to the story. So it's a very warm bonding thing. And literacy rich. So here we have a really good example of the soft lighting. There's a connection to nature, there's timber being used, there's hessian over the table, there's greenery, there's plants, there's that sense of safety. This is an organized space, but it's invitational. And it's invitational because the teacher has paid attention to detail. And you can see that she could have just had a table there and had some paper and some pens on a table, but she's taken the time to put the hessian down first, then a placemat, then something else, and then 2 tones of paper. And then she's even put the pencil there, but at an angle. So it's invitational. It looks to a child as though they can just go there, sit on the bench, pick up that pencil and start writing. It's also a literacy rich space because she has literacy things. There's books there, there's different things that stimulate the literacy notion, as well as being open-ended and creative. You can see the mirrors are there again, the greenery is woven through, the soft lighting, the plants. It's a very calming space. And remember what we said, a calm brain is a thinking brain. There's a little bit of a Reggio influence there with the way the pens are positioned or collected in the glass jars. But it's a nice soft space, and it's a defined space that has a purpose as well as being open-ended. Now we've talked about lighting. Another great way to add lighting to a space is to use these sparkly lights. And you can see that there's small defined spaces there, and there's a table at the back right-hand side there that's, one for 1 or 2 children. So it's a nice defined little space. And the roof line has been lowered because of the use of the curtaining, but also those little fairy lights. They're very effective, and I've seen them used in a lot of classrooms really well. And it just softens the whole space. So we've got that lowered roof line, we've got those small spaces, and the fairy lights adds to the atmosphere. And it's almost like using your imagination of the night sky. Imagine lying on the top deck of that play structure there and just looking up at those lights. It'd be like lying outside and looking at the stars at night. So using the imagination. Now, psychological containment can be as simple as this. It can just be a little space underneath a desk or underneath a table. Now, you might want to drape some of that organza material. That's that see-through material. You might want to drape that over the top so that one side is sort of closed in. And as a teacher, we can see in so that we can see what's happening and that everyone is safe. But for a child, it feels like no one can see them. So that's the psychological containment, and that adds to that feeling of safety. And you can see it's just for a couple of children there. And we've got the soft furnishings. We've got the collection of books in natural cane baskets. So it's using that natural materials again, and soft colours with the cushions. So connection to nature is really important. And this is a space for one. It's an experimentation space. It's open-ended. It's got science concepts, as you can see. There's literacy included with books and writing materials. And again, there's a lot of attention to detail. The teacher has thought about how to present the materials. And I'm often asked, well, won't the children just wreck that? It looks great when the teacher's done it, but won't the children wreck it? And once you start setting up classrooms in this way, children realise that this is the way their classroom is. This is just the way it's like this every day. So they don't need to really pull things apart so much because they know it's going to be there tomorrow. So for the first little bit, you're right, children do wreck it, basically. They really explore with all of the materials and they want to have a go at all of it because they think if they don't do it now, it's going to be gone. So that's a teaching opportunity for us. It's teaching the children about responsibility, about turn taking, about being mindful of their friends. When we teach them that we need to put things back and tidy things up and leave them as we found them. So it's a teachable moment. And over time, the children learn that, and then the children are very respectful of these spaces that you so carefully set up. And the children take part in setting them back up ready for the next day. So at the end of the day, they can have another little tidy up time, I guess you would say, and make sure that it's ready for the learning for the next day. So it's not all on us to prepare our rooms. We want to give children agency. We want to have children have that sense of belonging. And that adds to those emotions that we're talking about in this set framework. So this is a broader image, and you might feel that this is too busy, or you might feel that it's just right, but it's an example of how we can bring nature inside, how we can use the soft colours and the natural materials and those open-end opportunities for learning. There's the lowered roof line, the soft lighting, and the defined spaces, all in this one little image. So our third area that we're going to focus on in our set framework is the area of the brain that's designed for thinking. So with that, it's the neocortex, and that's where that problem solving, the memory, the thinking, and the learning takes place. After the lower levels of the brain have been taken care of, when we've made children feel safe and we've linked to the emotions, we can then get into the thinking part. Children feel safe, calm, secure, honoured, and then the thinking brain has a chance to shine. So in these spaces for learning, we have a range of different spaces in our classroom for different purposes. We have learning spaces for engagement. We have recalibration spaces, which are almost like respite spaces where children can go and get away from the world. We have meeting spaces where we can use explicit teaching methods. We have proximity spaces where children can be by themselves or in a small group of 2, 3, or 4 children. And we have flexible thinking spaces. So that's the way we position our seating, which could be a variety of things. And we're going to look at that in these images. But we make sure that we have children use a variety of spaces to support specific skill development. And these spaces take a break from bigger groups. We have the different learning spaces, as I mentioned, and you can sort of see that in this image here, all of the different spaces. We have defined spaces there. We have some rounded corners. We have areas that where the furniture has been used to divide spaces. Now, there's other ways to divide the spaces up as well. And again, you might think that this is too busy or just right. It's your own personal preference, but it's about making sure we have those set concepts in mind when we're thinking about how we're designing our classroom. This is an example of a little recalibration space, and you see it can be so simple. It can be just like this, a washing basket with a cushion. How easy is that? Also, a table or a small space facing the wall with some sensory materials will soothe and calm a child who's experienced heightened emotions or just needs to have a break. Another example of a recalibration space that also includes science and math skills. You can see that there's a magnifying glass and some measuring tapes. Proximity spaces. Excuse me. This is spaces that are okay for single children, pairs, or a small group. Or a small block area is also an example of this. This space in the image here has a literacy skill focus, and it's probably built from the interests of the children. But always we have a literacy focus in the spaces, or a numeracy focus too, if you want to. You know, those rocks that are there could just as easily be numbers. So we're looking at skill development here too. So it might be a literacy skill that we're wanting to develop. It might be fine motor skills that we want to develop. But each of the spaces have a designed purpose for it, and often built from the children's interests, but involve a skill as well. So there's quite a bit in designing these spaces that we can't go into here. But when we're planning and thinking about the spaces, we're always thinking about the types of skills that can be developed and what part of the brain we're activating. So this is an example of a meeting space, and this is for explicit teaching opportunities. It can be whole or part group learning experiences or discussions, story or music time. And we've probably all got these in our classrooms in some form. Flexible seating is another part of the thinking part of our set framework. And they're thinking spaces for self-exploration and experimentation. There can be a variety of stimulus, including books to promote that literacy combined with play. And those little logs that are on the ground there, they're actually little cushions, and they look really effective, don't they? But you can see that the teacher has taken time to weave some material through that lattice work at the back. There's literacy there, there's soft furnishings, and it's open-ended, so children can explore whatever they want. She's also included the soft lighting as well. It's just a small little space tucked into a corner. Again, we've got open-ended natural materials and we've got low-level seating in a small place, and this is just for 1 or 2 children. But again, there's attention to detail. There's a little tablecloth. There's the way the things have been positioned, the lighting, the greenery. There's attention to detail. And the lattice work on the right-hand side there allows it to be divided from the next space, and yet you can see through it. So it's not like it's feeling really enclosed. You feel it as though it's a defined space, but it's not claustrophobic. So here we have an opportunity to have a look at the proximity and flexible thinking spaces. So again, this is for 2 children, and that's clear because there's 2 areas set up. And it's open-ended. Whilst it's about fossils, there's greenery in there. There's the different experiences. It's sensory. There's different textures that the children can feel, different things to look at. And again, it's literacy rich because there's books there about fossils and bones. So these concepts can also be taken outside. So you can have little nooks and crannies outside in your playground area too. Notice the attention to detail used as a stimulus for children's open-ended learning in this space. So simple. So to summarise, we've got places and we've got our brain set classroom design, and we marry them together to form a classroom that looks a little bit like this. And again, this might be too busy for you, but this is a small section of the classroom. Imagine if you stepped right back at the door and overlooked the whole classroom. It might have a bit of a different look for it. I've included this photo because I wanted to show you the elements in there. We've got the designing for learning elements. We've got the defined spaces. We've got wayfinding. There's a clear pathway. We've got the roof line being lowered. We've got the acoustics with different things hanging. We've got the soft lighting. And the rounded corners isn't evident in this image, but having an area where the furniture is on an angle or having round tables adds to the interest in the room. Then we go to the feelings for learning, the emotions. We have some soft furnishings there, but there's soft colours. There's the psychological containment and the small spaces. There's the soft lighting, and there's the connection to nature. Then we have the thinking area of the brain and the areas for learning. In that same image, we have the variety of learning spaces. There's small spaces for recalibration and respite. There's meeting places for explicit teaching. There's learning spaces of different sizes to consider proximity to others. There's flexible seating areas for thinking about different concepts. So overall, this is a bit of a summary of our brain set framework. And I just want to finish this section and say, when a flower does not bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And I know this is one of Sandra's favourite quotes as well. That's right, Sandra, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is absolutely one of my favorite quotes. And another one of my favorite quotes is from Susan Anita Rule Oles. And she says that we must do everything in our power to create a place of honor for children, because we are in the company of miracles. So we need to create an environment that's worthy of a miracle. And we'd like to thank you so much for joining us on this presentation. Here's a little bit about myself, and one of my favorite quotes from Anita is, "A spirited place enlivens the soul." And then from Kathryn.
Play is our brain's favourite way of learning. I think as an early childhood educator, where we speak the same language and we all know that play is important, but it also links to our brain development. And this presentation has been about that, as well as the power of place and space and those built environments.
Oh my gosh, you guys, that was extraordinary. I think that the brain set framework and that whole sense of place and how we build environments for children, I know everyone, we have links below how to connect with their work. It's extraordinary. Thank you so much for bringing this work to us. Wow. Amazing.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conference. It's such an honor. So thank you.
And I second that, Sandra. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Like I said, I am mind blown. Thank you.
Good. That's good. We've done it, Sandra.
It's like really powerful stuff. And I think it takes so much of what we know about environment and brain science and emotional needs of children and brings it all into, you gave us real concrete help. And that's what we need.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.